Greetings, everyone. Thank you for joining us today, and welcome to our Saturday's unification session. And today we are starting straight with the two presentations on the topic of the day, where we are going to look at mass movements and popular power. I would actually be interested to probably make news and news across the globe be the last item we do, based on the views we get from our YouTube channel. Sometimes when people log in and start listening to our conversation, probably they expect us to go straight to our points and our discussion topics. So we will start straight to our presentations. After presentation, we go to question and answers. After question and answers, we'll have an open floor. After open floor, then when we give about our news across the updates for the next week, we'll also just share basically what has happened across the globe this week. So I'm trying to change that structure so that we go straight to our points and then we move in that order. So once again, welcome to members of Jonas, Brother Kwame, Brother Mfanelo. Brother Mfanelo, happy to see you. It's been a while. And welcome. We equally have Sister Portia, Brother Philip, and then Sister Tapua. Without much ado, I will be interested for Brother Kwame to start the presentation, then I'll go to Sister Portia. Unless, Brother Kwame, you have any objection on that, please let me know.
No, I don't mind Sister Portia going first. It's fine.
So if that's the case, then we'll allow Sister Portia to go first. Sister Portia,
and I don't
let me make you Sister Portia, let me make you a co-host. Brother Kwame, make Sister Portia a co-host if she has anything to share, so that she can. Yeah, Sister Portia, you're now a co-host, so you can start. Maybe the maximum minutes is 20, maximum 25, but you give it 20 minutes. If you can make it within 20 is okay. If you make it 25, that will be the extreme time limit we give you. So we are in Kenya it's 9:06 p.m. So maybe by 9:30 or 9:25, that will be okay. So as I've said, the topic is mass movements and popular power. But yes, Sister Portia, please go ahead and share your presentation.
Yes, I asked that Brother Kwame go first, please, as you have, since you're the chair, and I'll follow after Brother Kwame, please. Thank you.
Okay, in that order, please. Let's proceed with the Kwame if you are ready. Brother Kwame, if you're ready, please let me know.
Okay.
Let you go ahead.
Is my screen clear?
Yes, very clear.
Your screen is clear.
Okay. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, everyone, for coming. So I'm Christian Agbutsa, Director of the Nkrumah Trusts, and I'm presenting on mass movements and popular power. And as usual, I look at it from a mathematical and anatomical point of view. So the vision that drives the unification sessions on Saturdays is a united Africa, where, and by united Africa we mean, or I mean, the organic and united. So let me put my camera on so you can see me. The organic and the organic and united the organic and indigenous nations of Africa who were the organs of the African Union serve as instruments of these indigenous nations, and the states, the current neo-colonial states serve as servants of the African people, because the African people own the continent of Africa. The neo-colonial states are or should be our instruments, the instruments of our will, rather than owning us. And the core principle is that we must explicitly mandate, when I say we here, I mean the African nations, must explicitly mandate the replacement of the neo-colonial Hegelian doctrine, which says that the states own Africa, and the neo-colonial states own African resources. You know, they own us. They can even kill us, you know. And somehow they don't account, they are not kind of accountable to us. And that this should be replaced with the public trust doctrine, you know. And in other words, they are stewards, you know. They are our stewards. So that is the vision that I am approaching this. And as you would by now are familiar with, I do the analysis from a mathematical perspective, and the top formula is basically saying, if you read from the right to the left, it's saying that delta xj are the policies of the African Union, which should be the policies of the neo-colonial states if they were doing their job properly. And the alpha J, so the J basically are the number of policies there are. So you can have J1, J2, J3, etc. Then the alpha J, that's a proportional symbol that looks like an X, or, you know, that one stands for effectiveness. So alpha J stands for the effectiveness. So alpha J, delta XJ basically means the effectiveness of a policy. If you take all the policies that the AU has for the mass movements and popular power, then the idea is that if those policies are implemented, and the plus there means plus, the outcome in brackets T is the time, which is today, if you like, today, now. If they implement it today, or if they implemented it yesterday, it doesn't matter when they implement it, but if they implement them, then the future will be different. The future will be dollar outcome into brackets T plus N, which means that tomorrow will be different from today because of the effectiveness of those policies. And in looking at the mass movements and political power, you find out there are 3 levels of this, because we are dealing with the African Union. The first level is the African Union's own documentation. That's what I call level 3, the symbolic blueprint. By symbolic blueprint, I mean it's documents that say or that define what or how it sees the world. And there are AU norms and the African, the ACDEG stands for the African Charter for Democracy, Elections and Governance. So that is the AU norms. That is the main document. And there is a strategic, so this level is looking at the strategic continental mandate for democratic governance. So in short, the AU has these documents. The level 2 are the level of our states, the neo-colonial states, of which there are 55. If you take out the Western Sahara, that's 54. So this is the practitioner level as I see. This is where the states are meant to then implement these AU level policies. And currently there are 55 individual states. But the problem is that they are acting as absolute owners of the continent, but they are the intended implementers of change. And when they implement the policies at level 3, then that changes our lives at level 1. So level 1 is the level of the African people, the African majority, or ordinary Africans, if you like, who frequently face systemic exclusion and lethal state force. And the states can be really, really, really nasty to us. So those are the 3 levels. Now, so let's look at the current situation on the ground. And I've picked a few. Well, if there is time, I'll show 1 or 2 short videos. What is the baseline reality? The baseline reality is that the African neo-colonial states, all the 55 of them, are actually peripheral state structures, actively failing the African majority. By peripheral, I mean that they are not really sovereign states. They are arms of neo-colonialism, by which I mean the former imperialist states actually indirectly control them. So that is what we have. And in Sudan, there has been about, in the last 10 years, I've looked at what has been happening. I don't have all the data, but in Sudan alone, there's about 28,700 fatalities. In Ethiopia, Oromia, also we had 800 fatalities. If you take the Human Development Index, Senegal's ranking is 169 out of 191. So these are the situation with, if you like, mass movements, and you can see that our people are being killed, and their humanities are not being developed. The institutions that are responsible at the continental level for making sure that there is mass mobilization or mass in terms of our people, that there's democracy on the continent at the continental level are the African Union Commission and its political affairs, and then its African Political Affairs for Peace and Security. It's a kind of department, I think. Then there is also the Peace and Security Council. Then there's the African Peer Review Mechanism. And then we have the Pan-African Parliament. So these are the institutions, if you like, the institutions at the AU level that are responsible for making sure that there is democracy on the continent. And what I find, so what are the policies that the AU has in terms of democracy on the continent? Well, I found 4. They are: 1, the AU says there has to be popular participation. And this is where the African Charter for Democracy, Elections, and Governance comes in. It's a mandate for inclusive, citizen-driven governance and democratization. So that's one policy that the AU has. Then there is X2. The second one is the right to peaceful expression. And here, the idea is that Africans have the protected right, which has been affirmed by the Peace and Security Council for us as citizens to mobilize against oppressive systems. That is the second policy the AU has. The third policy is what it calls a rejection of UCG, unconstitutional changes of government. So, for instance, the AU would see the coup in the Sahelian states as unconstitutional, something like that. So, so there is the absolute prohibition of unconstitutional changes of government. This was agreed in the Lomé framework in around 2000. So that is the third policy, that the AU will not tolerate unconstitutional changes of government. Then the fourth policy is the operational fusion of the AGC is the African governance architecture, and then the African peace and security architecture. So these are the four main policies, documents, or mandates, if you like, that the AU itself has for mass movements and popular power. You find that the AU has a problem with mass movements, because when the Arab Spring happened, as you know, the North African countries are also part of the AU. Sometimes we forget, we think only those in the South or Sub-Saharan Africa are the only AU countries, but the others also are. And the AU had difficulty when there was mass mobilization on the ground against Gaddafi, against the other leaders in the North African countries. The AU really didn't know how to handle it because it had the X-ray policy against military interventions. But then, what if the people rise? So anyway, so these are the four policies that AU has. So what it means is that there should really be democracy on the continent. It also means that we Africans who see ourselves as indigenous members of the indigenous and African nations, organic nations of Africa, it means that really we have everything it takes. We have all the institutions, all the policies in place for us to organize and affirm our rights to the continent, right? We have the right to popular participation. We have the right to peaceful expression. Yeah. So if we decide as the nations of Africa that the neo-colonial states should be aborted, not aborted in the sense that they are abolished as such, but that they become instruments of our will, according to X2, we have a right to do that. Yeah, without us being shot and killed and so on. So that is it. So on the face of it, everything is there for there to be mass mobilization, popular power on the continent. That the continent should be directed by the will of the African people. The problem is the state. The neo-colonial states, as I've said again and again in my presentations, are the main stumbling block to the Africa that we want, because they haven't implemented these four policies are meant to be implemented, yeah, but they don't implement them, yeah. So if you look on the left of my slide, there is what I call the execution black hole. Implementation is entirely delegated to these 55 individual states, deeply wary of ceding sovereignty, shielding themselves from accountability. You understand? I mean, who held Kenya to account when they shot citizens? Who held this? Who held the state to account? Who held the Nigerian state to account during the SARS mass mobilization? Who has held South Africa to account following the killings and so on in South Africa? Who has held the state of Sudan to account? You see, so it's as if the neo-colonial state seems to get away with not accounting to the people of Africa. So there's a structural mismatch, right? It's a fatal disconnect between the strategic continental mandate, which is level 3, and the operational reality on level 1. So what is the result? Well, a severely disappointing sluggish pace of the African Charter for Democracy, Elections, and Governance in terms of its domestication ratification. And there's a deafening institutional silence during state-sanctioned crackdowns on popular power. Look at what happens in Sudan. I don't think Africans are even DRC. The killings that are going on, we seem not to be, perhaps we don't even care. The way Africans are killed, and other Africans just don't say much or say very little. You see? So this is the problem. The states, some of the states are, if you can, failed states. I think Sudan is a failed state. I think it's fair to say. So this is a problem, my brothers and sisters. The states, the neo-colonial states, are our fundamental problem. And the only way we can solve this is for the organic and indigenous nations of the continent. Those who were here before they arrived, the real owners, have to really stand up and be counted. So because the states have failed, you can see that my alpha is 0, which means that in terms of democracy, mass mobilization, popular power, there is 0 effectiveness on the ground as far as the AU is concerned, the AU documents are concerned. Okay, so the AU is endlessly refining equations and protocols whilst we die. And so what is the mathematical reality? As long as states operate as absolute owners rather than trustees of the continent, then the implementation coefficient will be 0. That is, the alpha will be 0. And if alpha is 0, it means the entire equation is 0. Yeah? So what is the evidence? Well, there is a Lekki Toll Gate massacre, if you remember, when the police, the Nigerian police and army, shot ordinary Nigerians because they wanted an end to the brutality of the police. There is a Reject Finance Bill shootings in Kenya. As to other examples. So I'm suggesting there is an institutional time bomb of neglect. So there is a symbolism without operational reach. So symbolism without operational reach is complicity. So what are the next steps? I think, as I have said to us, that the indigenous and organic nations of Africa, that we must mobilize these indigenous nations as a true level 2 practitioners, because the neo-colonial states will not implement democracy as it should. So we have to, our states have to intervene and make sure they are implemented, because left to the neo-colonial state, they won't do it. So the first action is to transition the multiplier, that is to demand that the states legally transition from absolute owners to fiduciary trustees under the public trust doctrine. That's the first thing we should fight for. Second thing is that the AU again has these nice documents. We are not using them. We are better at criticizing the AU than at least using what it has, to and work with what it has. And if we did, we'll be deploying the AU monitoring tools, citizen surveys that they do, they have data stories as binding, actionable evidence, and we can go to the regional courts to demand things. So we ourselves, that is the nations, have to wake up. We ourselves are fast asleep. Then the third action is to reframe the narrative. So I'm just suggesting that we should pivot all advocacy and institutional reform around the vision of a single united Africa, dedicated entirely to the liberation and prosperity of the African majority. So I think that is how our advocacy should go. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you, brothers and sisters.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Brother Kwame, for your presentation. I realize you are tackling mass movement from both sides, either the movement of people and also maybe the organization of people into mass power, mass movement as well. So thank you for that. We will be coming probably to questions and answers later, because I wanted Sister Pasha to do a presentation as well, then we come to tackle two of them. But Sister Tapua, please, if you come in briefly.
I was wondering whether Brother Kwame does not have the time to present the videos he'd said he'd present, maybe just one of them? He'd said he'd show us.
If the chair says I should, I would, yeah.
Yeah, I'm asking the chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Brother Kwame, how long is the video?
Well, some of them are about 1.5 minutes.
Okay, you can then I'll give you 5 minutes extra. So do see what you can do within the 5 minutes within the videos you have.
Okay. So
thank you.
Oh, hold on. Sorry. Brother Pigeon, I'm not sure if I've done something. Did I? You are not the host for some reason. Can you enable host? Can you enable sharing, please? I am now an ordinary member, so I can't share videos. So if you make me co-host, then I can share the video. Thank you. Brother Pigeon? Thank you. Right, okay. So the videos I've chosen sorry, I have a lot of this is open, so my apologies. Yeah, give me a moment. Sorry, Brother Pigeon, Chair. Hello?
Yes, Brother Kwame, I can hear you.
Yeah, no, due to time, can the second presentation proceed whilst I put the videos together, because it's it's not accessible as I had thought.
Okay, thank you. Sister Portia, in that place, come in and share your presentation with us, Sister Portia. Please proceed.
Okay, thank you. Can y'all hear me okay? Can y'all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I'm going to just share my, I put this in the chat because sometimes the PDF, it doesn't share well. So you have both of my presentations in the CSG WhatsApp group chat. And that way you can read it better, just in case it's not readable on screen. Okay, so I want to just say thank you so much, Kwame Nkrumah Trust, and also, of course, Conscientism Study Group, and thank all of you. I want to, of course, call out to the wise and knowledgeable, healthy and loving ancestors. And this presentation, as always, is going to have a different purview. This is my intent always from what presentations I've seen about the subject matter. And then I always ask that you challenge me if I have missed the point or I did not present accordingly. Healthy, loving, wise, and knowledgeable ancestors, Idilosi Amatango. The topic that I am presenting is implementable land power movements. And it is now almost 35 minutes past 1800 Accra, Ghana time. And my name is Portia C. Allen, and my presentation is presented virtually. So when I was thinking of this topic, I wanted to look at it from how these movements got to where they are contemporarily, because movements did not just start during racial capitalism. And so I am attempting to do that in my presentation. This image here, I believe that I would dare say a number of you are familiar with the Revolutionary People's Party. And I like this picture because it shows that revolutionary includes all of us, not some of us. And this quote here, when I continue on and on about racial capitalism, it's because of stuff like this. So this is Dr. Anna J. Cooper, and she is the only Black person in a U.S. blue passport quoted. So then who else is quoted? Now, I read through my U.S. passport before knowing this about Dr. Cooper, and I did not see many Black persons quoted. I did see a quote from indigenous people. So when I see this, because the passport is being seen throughout the world, this is a context to me of how racial capitalism does not see us and why investing in such systems is not for us. Because if it's only including a few of us, which is what racial capitalist systems does, then how can we as Africans and African diasporas sit well with such a viewpoint? A few of you can come in, the rest of you, to heck with you. So when dealing with this topic, I wanted to first look at racial capitalism in the context of land, not the land that, again, dare I say, many of us are familiar with when we talk about traditional Akibalanese ways of seeing land. One of our king brothers said, the land belongs to the future, the present, and the unborn, or the future, the dead, and the unborn. And even before that, we had ways and systems of how land was managed. So it did not start in the 15th century. Now, why is this relevant to what we're talking about when we say mass movements? How does this even connect? So first is to see that our movements are a response to injustice. And those injustices are created by racial capitalist systems. So here, when you look at the blue sections I've highlighted, the early history of foreclosure suggests racialization and foreclosure evolved together to develop crucial elements of the land market and make this market central to economic growth as it remains now. one small episode, and this is what the author is saying, this is one small episode in this broader story to highlight a generative dynamic between race and economic innovation. So the mass movements that I'm going to suggest as a way forward, I am now going to move them outside of racial capitalism, because I contend that I think what we have been doing is we have been trying to fit our movements into racial capitalism. And so what I'm attempting here is to show how such a system will continuously or ignore us by using the example of how land was calculated to connect to fueling economic injustice. So it continues and it says that that type of racism is tied to the unequivocal commitment to the market's constitution, and that race fuels and is fueled by power disparities that produce advantages, opportunities, and profit. So the racial framework, which I presented about the discovery doctrine, and I alleged then that there was racial capitalism. The racial framework of the discovery doctrine, combined with the structure of debt-based financing, too toxic and alchemical effect as colonists shifted their debt burdens to native peoples and used that burden to force an equivalence between money and land. Now, of course, I'm talking about North America, specifically United States of America. And in no way is this presentation talking about how it globally did it. It's just having a small window to emphasize my point. So that portion of England, merchants, they quickly acquired political and social power through their monopoly on goods and leverage. They acquired over settlers who could not obtain the household goods they needed from lines of credit. So get a person indebted, have certain people benefit from that indebtedness, and then also say that those people who are by and large indebted or who don't own the land are inferior. So land too quickly became centrally important in the colonies because the necessity of engrossing a site for settlement. Does that sound familiar, i.e. Palestinian territories? Because it presented a solution to the challenge of building a settler population. The head right system, shout out to the 1619 Project, no matter the controversy, pioneered by Virginia, quickly adopted the practical of all the colonies, provided incentives to mitigate by promising an amount of land, frequently 50 acres, not 40 acres that we never got, for every head a person transported to the colony, including his own. So colonial governments' promises of land solved by many, their promises of land, so luring people to this new frontier, they saw many of their problems by luring people to the colonies, inducing them to transport others, building the labor force to procure fuel and other resources, and enlisting them directly in the process of locating residential sites and trade routes. Seeing what is happening in Iran can also be considered another microcosm. So moreover, as people arrived and populated colonial settlements, the sale value of the lands rose, creating a powerful feedback loop between migration, occupation, and profit. And this goes on and on to gather more of this point, but critically it's saying over the course of the 17th and 18th century, we know when we talk about enslavement, we know it, we can say that started around roughly the 15th century. So now to keep this going over the course of the 17th and 18th centuries, an evolving relationship between racialization and innovation transformed the instrument of foreclosure from a rarely used option of last resort to a practice and essential part of the machinery ensuring the liquidity of real estate. So it is important to know that the persons arguably who came over forced their way into territories that were not theirs. They did not have money. They were indebted economically. So instead of doing the freedom of justice, democracy of all that they themselves had been affected by in other areas like England, they ended up doing the same thing that was done to them. And as I said, racial capitalism systems is a unique system, not in a good way. It had never been done before when we talk about perceived race. So this is what has happened in the United States as an example. So if we have movements that have, and I gave a presentation about different movements, if we have movements that have been by and large trying to fit into racial capitalist systems, you could argue, I could argue, this is why the movements have failed. Because as what I have just shared here, they're not my words, they're from that book, Racial Capitalism, and I'll give the author credit in the momentarily. So the author who is positing these points is saying that you had a system where before land was not used to entrap people. I would argue that's where I disagree with the author in that it was not used to entrap people into economic poverty. The author goes on to say, in my opinion, that what made it distinct in the United States of America is that land now was used based on perceived concepts of inferiority tied to perceptions around a concept of race. And so that is how some people, white men, kept the economic wealth for centuries. And how even in 2026 in the United States of America, if you go into the nice areas of the United States of America, the suburbs, you will see less Black people. Leave out the suburbs that are there where have only Black folks. But in those majority of places, if you go into the suburbs, you will see very few Black people. That is a consequence of what I have just read. So if we continue, we Africans and African diasporans, I posit, trying to fit ourselves into racial capitalist systems, we will keep having problems in the movement. Now, we know about COINTELPRO. We know that those systems are going to try to destroy any efforts around unification. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the concept of where a speaker said yesterday at the AU ECOSOC meeting that we cannot exist without, she didn't say racial capitalism, and if you can kindly mute, she didn't say racial capitalism. She said we cannot exist without the current economic structure. Well, we can. So we all know that with racial capitalism, if you can kindly mute, we all know the harms. So we're talking political, economical, social, intellectual, religious, and ecological orchestrations that are shaped mostly by Eurocentric narratives. They will have one of us, like the Black lady in the United States of America, passport, but they will not have all of us. And I don't want to be in any systems that don't have all of us. So we're talking about structural, institutional, and systematic racism, sexism, and gender discrimination, classism, and other economically exclusionary practices. We are also talking about economic, environmental, and food poverty, enslavement, and of course, the territorial takeovers. So that being said, what are our options? If you can kindly mute, please. One moment, please. Okay, thank you. Okay. So what are our options? We actually have a lot of options. So when we look at indigenous Akibalanese context, where land was managed, where people were, there were no jail systems, where there was no concept that it could be a few eating while masses of people starved. If we go back to those indigenous Akibalanese contexts and noted the controversy some people have about Akibalanese or Kibulan, I contend, and these are not my words, these are writer Bulkman Bird's words, that we can do 4 or 5 things. We can have viable economic systems based on communalism, egalitarianism, and ethical reciprocity. We can have homeschooling, community schooling in the forms of political education, psychological education, mental health education, economical education, personal education, family education, community education, technological education, communications education, scientific education, and environmental education. 3, we can have our autonomous zones, networks where we are mutually mobilizing for our community's prosperity, plus those communities are safe, secure, and protected spaces. And 4, we can have technology where we are communicating with each other, similar to our ancestors who originally had the first type of communication, arguably the talking drums, and know that we had other forms of communication. I'm not limiting us to the talking drums. So we could have encrypted communications among our people, and we could have security forces at the local, state, regional, and global levels. And then we can also have in those communications a continued her story, because we've had written cultures before. We've had documentation cultures before, where we are, of course, talking about indigenous Akibalanese and living principles such as the Mayat principles. So I want to shout out right now to Revolutionary Joanne Victoria Bird, RE the Panther 21. And then I want to read this before I wrap up, which is, it says, I have restored what was cast down. I have built up what was uncompleted. Since the Asiatics arrived in this land and the barbarians were among them, destroying buildings while they governed, not knowing Ra. So shout out to Queen Mat Kari Hatshepsut. Pardon me, shout out to Queen Makari. So if we know that land has been used to racialize us, to keep us in an economically impoverished state, and we also agree that our revolutionaries, by and large, not all of them, but by and large, have been trying to fit in racial capitalist systems, then I dare say, what then is the next step? If we look, for example, that there are more than 20 African member states out of the AU 55 member states that have engaged in large-scale transactional land deals. The most recent example I heard was in Kenya, that there was a person who was trying to buy up land in Kenya. I won't mention their nationality so that no one can say that I'm being segregation-like. But basically, right now in the continent, on Africa, would pass all the loftiness that I just read in the previous slide. So past this one of what we can have, the reality is that on the African continent, there are land transactions. That land is being leased by people who don't have our best interests. And then also when we talk about the fact that indigenous Akibalan did not have prisons, we also know that the reasons why there are more prisons happening, again, in the United States, for example, they are happening because, just like with the whole situation of chattel enslavement, if you can have a person arrested and tried for a crime, then that person in the United States of America loses so many of their rights. And those rights, when they are lost, then that person becomes a person of whom? The state. And with that being the state can profit from that person. So we see now in the United States of America, Africans and African diasporas, we see that there are growing numbers of prison being built on land. And from that labor of the people who are in those prisons, mass profits are being made. Now let me go to my last slide of now, after the lofty ideas, what are the practical actions that can be done? So we can remember the context of those movements that did not work because they were trying to fit into systems that are against us. So not to disrespect them, but to just remember that we cannot fit into systems where there have been land grabs, where people were seen as chattel, enslaved, slave persons, where today on a United States of America passport, there's only one Black woman quoted in that passport. So we can look at those contexts and know that racial capitalist systems do not serve us. And so our protests are not to go towards joining them and reforming them, but getting out of them. So I suggest 3 types of revolutions. They're not new. Sacred land revolution, which is that we fight for our land. We have ancestral revolution, which is that we have an honoring of what was working before racial capitalist systems. And then we have a health and healing revolution in the food that we eat, how we talk to each other, how we trust each other. And then thirdly, we have to, I would argue, look at how our attitudes are in terms of Sankofa-led shifts. We are demanding accountability. All right, brother. We are demanding an accountability from ourselves and from others. So this leads to what Brother Kwame's point was earlier, that we cannot have our government selling our lands and we just accept it. And so now the 4th point of that is what I suggest that here, what we do at Consciism Study Group. I suggest, because every Saturday we have the presentation, and that in a way is helping us move towards continued unification, liberation, and development of Kibalan and its diaspora. I suggest that we do another tier, and that tier is to take all of those types of documents that Brother Kwame has already reviewed and look at what practically from those documents can we as the Conscientious Study Group through the Kwame Nkrumah Trust actually implement, and then implement those. That is how I see what is now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sister Parker, for your presentation as well. We will go to questions and answers. So straightforward, anybody who has any question or answer to the 2 presentations, please let your hand be up. I'll pick the hands that will be up first. Anybody?
Brother Pigman, can we just salute the 2 presenters, please? Because they were good presentations, and I thank you for both.
Yeah, please do that. Go ahead. Sister Portia, Sister Ida, please go ahead and thank the presenters on our behalf.
No, I just felt that we should at least clap for them and tell them that thank you very much, because they're important presentations and land is an important issue. So I thank you both for the effort you put into telling us about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sister Ida, for that. And thank you, both Sister Portia and Brother Kwame, for your presentation.
Well, we accept the thanks.
Those are two angles, Brother Kwame.
But we are part of you. So.
Yeah, thank you. I'm saying those are two different angles. Sister Portia moved it to the land. Brother Kwame focused more of the movement of people as well. So there are two angles of that presentation. And I think we can take some few questions. So I'll only take hands that are up. So if you wish to speak, just let your hand be up, because I'll take maybe 4 or 5 hands. Then we go to response to those questions. Then we just open our conversation. So let me start with Elder Sam. Elder Sam, please come in.
Thank you, Brother Pigeon. Am I audible enough? Brother Pigeon, am I audible?
Yes, you are audible, Elder.
Thanks. Good evening, everybody on the platform. And thanks for the presentation. Brother Kwame, in your first presentation, I heard you as if you are saying our leaders have all the instruments, they have all the blueprints, but the challenge is implementation. I'm not sure if that is a true perspective of this aspect. Is there no element that our leaders are held by the imperialists? They are dictating for them. So the blueprints are there just to show us, the people in these countries, something that we can think there is something, while they know that nothing is there basically for implementation. Thank you.
Kwame, you can respond to that, and then you go to Brother Ifo.
Yeah, I think brother. Yeah, I think brother. Sam is making the point, a very important point, that so if you look at the AU's levers of change, and what Brother Sam is saying is that even these levers of change may not, if implemented, may not even get us to where we want to be. So in as much as I am saying on this slide that the level 2, the new colonial states are the obstacle to the democratization of the continent, in the sense that they have failed and continue to fail to implement the African Charter for democracy, elections, and governance. Yeah, the way that the AU has mandated it, that because they have failed to implement them, the popular power is not where it should be. So that is my understanding of what the Sam is saying. If I may take, and therefore I agree with him. Now, if I show you this video, I won't play it all of it because this one is about 3 minutes long. But also I won't play all of it. But this is the gentleman in charge of the charter. This is what he is saying. So here he is. He is saying this.
Serving the people of Africa through the development of a solid governance architecture within the African Union is the main motivation of Ambassador Salah Siddig Hammad, head of the Secretariat of the African Governance Architecture of the African Union, enjoying the human rights segment of the African Union's Department of Political Affairs 6 years ago.
Africa, as we all know, has been going through a lot of challenges, from the slavery to colonialism to apartheid to the Red Terror, genocide and civil wars. And that is why our heads of state and government decided in their own wisdom to adopt Agenda 2063 for building the Africa we want and the Africa we deserve.
In 2024, more than 130 million people are facing humanitarian emergencies due to conflict, the threat of terrorism, and the effects of climate change. This flood of refugees and internally displaced people in 14 countries across the continent saw only a third of their needs covered in 2023. Ambassador Salah Siddig Hammad is concerned about the situation.
As Africans, once we are united, we become a power within the international fora, but also will enable the African citizens and the African youth in particular to move around the continent freely and to reside wherever they want to reside and establish new lives.
Ambassador Salah Siddig Hammad has more than 25 years' experience of fighting for respect for human rights and is particularly interested in press freedom in Africa. On December 29, 2020, the African Commission of Human and People's Rights adopted a resolution on the safety of journalists and media professionals in Africa. The head of the Secretariat of the African Governance Architecture of the African Union has made it his mission to remind the states parties of their commitments, in particular the decriminalization of press offenses and the revision of laws guaranteeing freedom of expression.
But it is not only about ratifying the treaty, it's also about domestication, implementation and reporting, and making sure that we are really in the right path to implement this very important treaty at the national level.
The African Governance Architecture was adopted by the member states of the African Union in 2011. This mechanism promotes common African values such as good governance, democracy, fair and equitable elections, and respect for human rights. According to Ambassador Salah Siddig Hammad, the aim of these values is to prevent conflicts on the African continent.
Okay, so that is it. So he is the gentleman in charge of the charter, and this is what he's saying. So to summarize, I think I agree with what Brother Sam is saying, which I think would mean that the indigenous and organic nations of the continent have to step in. Thank you.
Thank you. Brother Ifo, please go ahead.
All right, thank you. The last statement about the indigenous governance, I agree 3,000,000%, with one caveat. We need to be conscious about the difference between colonially imposed chiefs and the actual indigenous governance system. Because, for example, in the place that they stole and decided to call Nigeria, they invented some titles as a way of dominating the people. And the power and the authority of those artificially created colonial chiefs comes through the colonial state of Nigeria and not through the traditional governance structure, which in some cases was council of elders, councils of grandmothers, all those kind of things. Those don't exist. Their pay also comes from the state. So in the land that they stole, that they decided to call Canada, they also have the same thing, where you have the hereditary chiefs who are respecting the tradition and whose alliances to the people. And then you also have the Canadian government imposed chiefs on the indigenous people whose responsibility is to the state of Canada and not to the people. But that was actually not why I raised my hand. There's two things. When you talked about the AU, right? The AU itself is a legacy of colonial misunderstanding of the world. Because, if we claim that we're independent people, why are we maintaining the borders that were created in Berlin without our consent, right? So there needs to be a reckoning within the AU. And if we look at what the AU has done recently, they have only tried to sanction those who kicked out the French. You know, they haven't sanctioned people who've been blatantly abusing their own people. But back to
let me consider it as a contribution as well. So it's both question and contribution. I hope that's okay.
Okay, sure. So my question here, I guess, is on that is, how do we deal with that contradiction in a way that allows us to progressively move forward with the things that might be good within AU, but then understanding that it's an incomplete victory? That's one. And then the second one lies to the second presentation that talked about capitalism and how we need to be conscious of not getting into that trap, because Dangote is now the richest African in Africa. I left in '89, and I have been back 2 years ago. I'm going back shortly. And the material condition of the average person that lives within the land where Dangote made his billions is worse today than before he was a billionaire. So those people should be looked as not as contributors to the society, but as parasites who are destroying the society. But we see a lot of press praising these billionaires, but not asking what has happened, how did they get there, and what do they destroy. There's lots of indigenous, local farmers unions, farmers cooperatives that were destroyed because they were competition to Dangote. Right? So there's this need for us to be conscious about that as we move towards independent. As Malcolm X said, are we integrating into a burning house, or are we moving into something that is actually healthy, healing, and nurturing, not just for the select few, but for a majority of the people? And so I'm wondering your reflections on how we move forward towards that, and also how we share that in a way that people see it as possible. Because I think another part of what has been stolen is our imagination. And we're still being brainwashed to believe that the only very viable structure is the structure that destroyed us. So that's my contribution, and thank you.
So those are two questions, one directed to Brother Kwame, another to Sister Portia. Sister Portia, would you like to go first?
Thank you. I want to honor the ancestor by pronouncing her name correct, King Brother. Pardon me, just let me take this pause. It's Queen Matkare Hatshepsut. Queen Matkare Hatshepsut. Praises to the ancestor. And I will put, when I do my closing remarks, I will give the credit to whose words that I use, because I don't want to ever be accused of being a plagiarist. So to Comrade Efo's point, thank you. I have been screaming this because I have seen it on the continent. I see one time I was in a matatu in Kenya, and there was a lady on the radio, and she was like, I just want a rich man. And the guy said, you want a rich man? She says, I don't care if he's a murderer. I just want a rich man. That's how horrid racial capitalist systems is. As long as a person has money, no matter how they get it, they are respected because they have an abundance of money, which is not even money. So to Comrade Efo's point, you answered the question, which was in the PowerPoint slide that I had given, it's around the area of the mind. Let me just pull that up right quick. And then I want to emphasize that the mind is only one aspect of having the mind. If I, in pornographicness, if I have been raped by 20 men, and you come and tell me I'm a beautiful queen, I'm worthy, that is only one tier. I have to get to the healing and deal with the trauma that I have been raped, and that's hypothetically, that I have been raped, and how to deal with me learning to trust a man again, than just saying I'm a beautiful Black queen. So the answer, Comrade Ifo, is in what you said, and it's here in the slide that I mentioned here. And these aren't my words again, they're writer Bird's words. He suggested a new type of movement, popular power, mass movement. A new type of mass movement is homeschooling, community schooling, which we had this already again in ancient Equivalent. It's not trying to always pump up Equivalent, it's just saying the facts. There was no system like racial capitalist system. No system in the world like racial capitalist systems. So we already had universities, we already had a community type of way of schooling where we were delving into the psychology, addressing mental health, addressing personal health, family education. So how we do that is we go, this is what I was saying, we revert to those indigenous principles that are healthy, and all the Maya principles I have read, I don't see anything wrong with them. So that's a starting point just there. The one of the comments I want to say now, and then I wrap up, is a caution around, which I had said some weeks ago, a caution around saying we are going to educate anybody. Let's educate ourselves. Now, what am I trying to say? Am I saying let's leave our people to a side? No, it's just that sometimes when we are conscious, I know I've been there, when we are conscious or we feel we're conscious, we go around trying to think that we got to go and tell everybody how to be. And that's the mentality of racial capitalist system. And I need to say this point. There were systems in place working in Akibalan that worked actually greatly, worked well. So when I'm talking about racial capitalist systems, I'm not starting her story or his story from there. I wouldn't dare. I'm actually saying let's get out of the system. And how we get out of the system, in addition to those ways that serve us, those Maya principles, those homeschoolings, those community schoolings, another way is an awareness that if a drug addict, if an addict is, you see them, they just sitting there and they're on drugs. And even I always harping on drug addicts. Let's even move that away. It could be someone you think has potential. People tell that to me all the time. Wow, you have all these degrees. Why aren't you doing all of this? So instead of going into that person talking about how you're going to change them, rather we be that example. We don't go into a situation looking down on people and talking how they not educated and how illiterate they are. We could be illiterate. We could be uneducated. So it is the examples, and we did that a lot. We had a way of accountability and awareness. So how we do that is we check ourselves before we wreck ourselves, Comrade Ifo. We have accountable ways to hold us to account when we get into our egos. We have dealing with mental health, and we also have the mental mind. But we cannot just think I can say black power, when every time I go into my home, I'm up there beating myself in the face because I don't feel like I'm loved. I hope that answers your question.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, I think one of the things I got from Sister Portia's presentation is the idea of parallel institutions. And that is that in as much as we are in the world, perhaps we should consider institutions that are parallel to the racist capitalist system in which we are. So I think that then links up with what Brother Ifo has said, and I welcome his questions. So the first question is about the AU itself. Yes, there are criticisms of the AU, many of them. There was an Ethiopian brother who presented to us, if you recall, some months ago, if not, maybe about a year ago, in which his presentation was that the AU is useless, it should be abolished, and so on and so forth. So, yes, there are criticisms of the AU. The point I think I am making is that until it disappears, it has some good parts. For example, some of its documentation, which the neocolonial states have refused to implement. You see, so that in itself is an interesting observation. That the AU is very useless, we think it's useless, and people say so, and yet it has these documents that, if implemented, will improve the AU itself. And yet the states who are meant to implement these documents are not doing so. So the AU is being blamed when actually it's the states, that are not implementing them. So Brother Ifo's criticism is valid. I think so. Because if the AU is attempting to organize the new colonial states, how would that work? Because the states don't want to implement the AU's policies. Then we have the indigenous and organic nations. And again, as Brother Ifo says, even they sometimes can be the problem. Some of them were created by the neo-colonialists, by the imperialists. Some of them are in bed with neo-colonialism, etc., etc. So even there, we should be careful. But at the end of the day, we have to act. We have to do something. We can't wring our hands and say, it won't. This won't work. That won't work. This won't work. That won't work. And so maybe, as Sister Amma always reminds us, let's go to the people and ask the people. The people have answers. The people have answers which we may not have access to. I remember there was the regional governments of Ghana. They have all these nice policies, and yet you find that when you go to the ministries and then they give you a document, and you find that actually the holders of that knowledge are actually on the ground amongst our people. So actually our people may have all the answers. And then those who are educated or think they're educated, who have privatized all the tools of education because they haven't made them available to the people, they want to dictate to the people what the policy should be. Whereas they should actually listen to the people and then make the tools available for the people. So let me pause there, brother Chair.
Thank you, Brother
in short,
Kwame.
I agree with what they've said. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Brother Kwame. I'll be going across the attendance list in the next 20 minutes maximum. I know we either have been part of mass movement or popular movement, and we just want to hear from you, not even in terms of the contribution, but what are the lessons, what experience do you have, what can you say about them? So then after that, we'll get back to the presenters to do their wrap-up. Then I'll go to the news across the globe or across the continent. So just share your experience. If you've ever been in part of any movement, mass doesn't mean a million people. It can be a mass movement of either 10 people. What were you fighting against or what were you fighting for? How was the experience? Or if you can't share any mass movement that you like to highlight in the history that you think that is more important to put forth for today. So I'll start by, in my list, I'll start by Elder Sam. I know you have contributed, Elder Sam, but maybe in 2 minutes or 1 minute, you can share experience or anything in regards to this. Elder Sam?
Thanks, Brother Pigeon. I hope I will not say things that people already have heard and know about this, but my little experience here in South Africa, I will always use South Africa because that's the things that I can relate to and easily explain. The mass movement that we really experienced here in South Africa that I can talk of, there have been many of our ancestors that had uprisings and mass mobilization against the colonialists, but of the early 50s and 60s, we have seen the mass mobilization against the colonial and apartheid system by Robert Mangaliso Sobukwe, a person that not many people in the world know of, but who South Africa has up till today managed to stifle any literature, any speeches about that man. And that culminated in what is commonly known as the Sharpeville Massacre of 1960 in South Africa. That past movement was a strategic decision of that leader Sobukwe that mobilized almost the entire majority of the African people. And the strategy was simple behind that mass movement and protest, that all the workers, basically men and women that are of working age, must leave their passbooks at home and they must surrender themselves to the police. And initially people didn't see that, but the outcome of that was what shook South Africa almost to its knees. Unfortunately, when they arrested the main leaders of that movement, then everything fizzled out and it could not reach its logical conclusion. But it changed the whole approach of the struggle in South Africa. So we should recognize also that it changed also the perspective of how to look at the fight against apartheid and colonialism. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, Elder Sam. Thank you very much for that. Sister Ida, to you, any part of any mass movement or anything you can share, any experience or anything in the history?
I don't think so, but I see that this week, the trouble is I can't remember the names, though they're very big people and people who have anything to do with Ghana or Ghana News would have heard them. That we've all been complaining about Galamsey and all the poisonous things that have happened from it, destruction of waterways and stuff like that. And then we hear that there's been a court case in Ghana.
Yes, it's either Chairman Untumi. That's the one you're looking for.
Okay, so you can pronounce it for me, but I'll just tell you what
Chairman Untumi.
Okay, so this guy had a concession for a gold mine, and he then allowed somebody else to go and mine it via Galamsey. And then the person who has admitted, even in court, that yes, he was one of the Galamsey miners, and that this man had let him use his claim, then managed to not be charged for Galamsey, but this chairman was actually imprisoned because of his claim. So it makes, in a way, some things make no sense at all. And as a result, the person who was big time into his Galamsey has left the country and is not likely to be prosecuted as part of the destruction of the land, which, there are things that really it beggars belief. And, you read it and you think, no, this can't be true, but it is true. And so just like Aoife was saying about people being chiefs or being at the top of things to do with land claims, I think we need to look carefully and not just assume that people who have power are going to be working for the people that they have power for. I think I'll leave it at that and say thank you.
Thank you very much, Sister Ida. And my next person on the list is Sister Tapua. Sister Tapua, Feel free to share any experience of mass movement you participated in, or anything in the history or popular power, anything you'd like to share in regards to this.
I'm going to ask to skip for now, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next in my list is Abimbolu. Please share with us any experience of mass movements or popular power you have been part of, or that you've read of in the history that you may like to share with us for today. Abimbolu? Maybe in 2 minutes?
Please, I want to skip too.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to Sister Amma. Sister Amma, greetings. I know you joined us late. Welcome. Are you able to speak? Are you in a position to speak? Sister Amma, let me know that first. If not, I'll come back to you. Then let me get to
Hello,
Sister
good
Amma.
evening. Yeah, hello, good evening.
Good evening. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Apologies for joining late. Sorry, what is it that you're asking us to talk about, contribute?
We are looking at mass movements and popular power. Mass movements and popular power. So in your whole entire maybe reading or your life experience, have you ever been part of any mass movement? Is there any mass movement that then ring a bell to you that you'd like to share in terms of whether their strategy, organization, or anything on that, maybe in 2 minutes?
Yeah. I think, and I'll talk a little bit in the general sense, in that period post independence, I'm talking 60s, 70s up to the 80s. I think that there was a climate of, or leading up to independence, there was a climate of mass movements throughout the African continent and diaspora. And I think we need to look at how we get that back. So if you look into the United States of America, people were struggling for, they called it the civil rights struggle. It wasn't just about civil rights, it was about human rights. If you look to the Caribbean, struggles were going on in the Caribbean. You had people like Walter Rodney in I remember the party he was part of who was assassinated. You look even to where I'm based, Britain. In Britain, in that post-independence period in the 70s, you had a whole range of organisations, both connected to the struggles in the continent and connected to the struggles of peoples here. So I can remember in the 80s, we stood that there was a, what do they call it, a non-stop picket outside of South Africa House at Trafalgar Square, which was the embassy of South Africa. You had a whole range of organisations for. So there was a Black Panther Party in Britain, and there was trying to remember his name, a Nigerian who was part of that as well. You had organisations like Black Unity and Freedom Party, Black Liberation Front, Pan-African Congress Movement, All African People's Revolutionary Party. So there was, and many more. I'm just naming the ones that come to mind. So there was a whole climate. And then, of course, on the continent, we had the struggles in the parts of, in Bissau, Guinea-Bissau, Mozambique, Angola, against the Portuguese colonialists. You had the struggles. And so I think what I'm trying to say is part of rebuilding that mass movement is understanding how the mass movements were built during those periods and then what disrupted them. Now, one of the things that I keep on having this discussion with people, because I will study and read and look at everything and anything, and people will say to me, don't read this, don't read that, don't look at this because it's by the enemy. One of the things if you're in a war is you study your enemy, because those who do not want Africa to progress, for the people, not for individuals, and build, they're not sitting down quietly whilst we are trying to work out what to do. They are constantly. So I keep on telling people, Burkina Faso is being watched, and the watching, and they'll be looking to, how can I say, destabilize. So there's this whole thing about what you call intelligence is the term I think it is used popularly, where you actually study how those who are working against you, what they're doing, as well as trying to build the mass movement at the same time. So I really think the other thing is, so there's certain things I will not say in a public place, because the other thing is we do not necessarily, I believe, particularly when we're organizing, it's what you say, on a need to know basis. It's not everything that you have to disclose in public. Because if I don't know that X is going to meet Y, when somebody comes to me and says, is X going to meet Y? I don't know. Do you understand what I'm saying? So there's something about us being very strategic and tactical, and understanding that every advancement we make, there will be those who will be trying to pull us back. So how do we, what's the word term, sustain the gains that we make? And how do we begin to rebuild that mass movement? And two things are education of people, and some of that education of our people has to happen in person, in real time and real space. It cannot all just happen via these mobile devices. They are good up to a point, but we need to go to where people are at. That's one. And then two, as part of that education, or what goes in tandem with the education, is organising people, getting people to organise for action. And as Kwame said, we, the so-called educated elite, because actually all of us in this group are elite, just by the sheer fact that we can come into a space like this online, we do not have all of the answers. You know, if you look to people like Cabral and Michelle and whatever, when they were organising struggles, and even Kwame Nkrumah, they realised when you go out amongst the people, you realise you do not have all of the answers. That the people, a lot of the answers are invested in the people. It's a combination of us being in a position where we can help to organise and lead the people, but there's this thing called servant leader. So we lead from the position of being a servant and understanding and working, because the struggle belongs to the African masses, not the elite few, not us. Only us if we embed ourselves in the African masses, the African people. Because I'll say this quite frankly, the potential for any one of us, and I will say this, who is part of the educated elite, to at some point betray the struggle of the people is real. And I will argue with anyone, if you do not accept that if I do not accept that I have that potential, it means that I do not understand the struggle. Every one of us has the potential. It doesn't mean to say that we're going to do it, but every one of us has the potential to betray the struggle of the ordinary man, woman, and child in Africa. And all of our talk about African unity and this and that is so that ordinary people, and I use that term, some people don't like it, ordinary people can live a better life full of dignity, that the resources of our land are used to benefit the people, that they can... the CPP produced this booklet when they were about to go, or when they were in power, and it was kind of like policy. I'll have a look for it, joy and happiness, so that people can live happy lives. That's what it's all about. They don't need to be able to recite Nkrumah from back to front, etc., etc. All they want is to live better lives, which are peppered with dignity, which take into account all of their needs as human beings, where the resources are not being used by a greedy few who have embraced capitalism, but by those of us who recognise that our needs and rights are not paramount, or do not our needs and rights as individuals have to be within the context of the people. So I will finish there. Sorry for going on a bit long.
Thank you, Sister. I had to give you that opportunity to go a bit longer because of I know you've been involved a lot in mobilization, organization, and all these stuffs around the mass movement and the power. And in fact, you're speaking to what Nkrumah speaks at. So I will only allow 2 more members who would like to contribute, maybe to have their hands up. If you want to share experience of a mass movement you've been part of or popular initiative you've been part of, just let me know so that I'll give you an opportunity to share your thinking based on our time. Any 2 people would like to maybe share their experience on this? Let your hand be up so that I can call your name. Oh, Sister Tapo, I did pass. So let me go to Abimbolu and then Sister Tapo in that order. Abimbolu?
Okay. All right. Thank you. Good evening. Initially, I wasn't sure if I understand the question, and even now I'm going to mention maybe 3 events or 2 historical and 1 currently ongoing. I wasn't part of the first one. That was
Abimbolu, your audio is not right. Abimbolu, your audio is not okay. So please find some good network maybe. Then you can come back, please. Work on your network, please, Abimbolu, if that's okay with you. Sister Tapo, please go ahead. Then I'll come back to Abimbolu once he try to check on his network.
Thank you very much to the presenters and all the contributors. What has come to mind for me is the determination and focus that the white garment churches have, and the way they have acted as a mass movement in resisting colonial imposition of values that are imposed externally. I know as part of the educated elite, we kind of tend to look down on them using the Western perspective. But the determination in which they live their lives and the way they conduct themselves. And then I have what I would call an unusual position because some of my relations are part of that movement and they're so happy and content in whatever they're doing, and they're not moved by the so-called affluence and direction that the educated part of the family are going towards or aspiring to. And for me, that is something that we could learn from in terms of how they do it and how they sustain that kind of social movement and that kind of resistance and social change. And in Zimbabwe in particular, we've now seen those politicians who want to gain ground suddenly find themselves going to the white garment churches, spending a lot of time sitting in the sun and listening to them and hoping for votes. And last week or so, the president of the country was out there in my particular town with his garment on and sitting under some kind of open space, listening to the people. And I was mesmerized by what it is that they do and how they've come to this position. So that's my perspective of a different kind of mass movement. Thank you.
Thank you.
That we could learn from. Yeah.
Thank you. Abimbula, are you there? Because I want to get back to for the Okomi and Sister Portia to give their final statement on this. Abimbule, is he around?
He hasn't come back, no.
Okay, let me start with Sister Portia. Sister Portia, your final remark on this, maybe 2 minutes or 3 maximum. Your conclusion on this presentation.
Thank you so much. I want to promise to do what I said, which is none of the words I had in my presentation in quotes were mine, and so I want to credit that for the audio record versus just putting it in the chat. One was from the book of Histories of Racial Capitalism, edited by Destin Jenkins and Justice Leroy. The specific chapter I looked at was the example of foreclosure by K. Sue Park. And then another quote was The Empty Land Myth, and it was published in April 9th, 2015, and it was updated 21st July 2026. I did not see the name of the author. Another one was by Isaac Samuel, which was Land and Property in Pre-Colonial Africa, Land Ownership, Land Sales, and the Shortfalls of the Land Abundant Africa Theories. And then the remaining one was Settler Colonialism is the Root of Kenya's Brutal Penal System. The writer was Patrick Gathara, and that was in the Elephant publication. Kindly please now to my final remarks, and just want to say thank you again. I would like please to not be called elite. I despise the term. I obviously cannot stop anyone from how they think about me, but I ask please if you're in my presence that you do not refer to me as elite. I detest the term, and I do not consider myself an elite at all. I strive to be a healthy revolutionary who contributes to continued liberation of Akibalon and its diaspora. The points I will say is remember the unknowns. I'm mindful that we all have different perspectives on how these worlds work and what type of power each of us hold. I am where I am. I have seen the healthy, loving, wise, and knowledgeable ancestors work amazingly, and I'm striving each day to tap more into how they guide me, doing what I also have to do within my own power, acknowledging, which I also agree with, and I've said continuously, that I do not know it all. So I do need some guidance. So there are unknowns, and I believe that Queen Amirenas, I believe that King Shaka Zulu, among many more, I believe they knew that. I believe they knew that there were the unknowns, and that no matter how difficult it was in reality, that was not the end all be all. So that's my first point. And then I ask us please to meet, those of us who can, to review the documents that Professor Kwamity has called to account and see what we can do. With that, I agree, and I have said as well, we go to the juke joints, we go to the clubs. That is where the people are. They are not in these quote unquote ivory towers talking about how smart I am. They are outside of those ivory towers due to racial capitalist systems. And to the racial capitalist systems point, it does not benefit us. A passport currently of United States of America has one quote by one Black woman. One quote by one Black woman. To me, that is a microcosm of how racial capitalist systems see us. Only a few of you, very few, will be benefiting from this system, this horrid system. The rest of you, to heck with us. And so I want to be with the rest of us. And so we have systems that we have built before. They are not impossible to revisit, of course, contemporarily, and knowing that they do not they cannot be with racial capitalism. It is a cancer. It harms us. And so then that's to my last point is what I'm personally getting ready to do, what I call jumping off into the water, not literally, but the next part of my phase, because I haven't had salary work in almost 5 years. I have learned that I don't need racial capitalist systems. What I need is community. What I need is to be honest with myself about why I'm doing things, how I'm doing things. And so in the place that I live, am I with peace with the people I live? Or am I distreating them and then going out in the streets talking Black power? If I keep living in a way that are those principles of Mayat, among others that are healthy, the people, when I ask to meet with them, they will see something good in me as I will see in I. And that is mass movements. It is the unknowns. It is living how we are to be. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sister Portia, for that powerful ending. Of course, it is with the people. You must live with the people, survive with the people, and be with the people. That's the spirit of the revolutionaries, because the revolution belongs to the people. Now, Brother Ifo, you want to come in very fast or briefly, because I want to ask Brother Kwame to also bring his final remark, and as he shares the topic for next week. Brother Ifo, is it that urgent?
You had asked people to talk about their things with mass movements, and I was waiting for my name to call. And it was them.
Can you make it brief? Because I'm in the last
Okay.
phases of this. Can you make maybe a minute or two maximum? Because I'm trying to come to the end. Can you make it maybe a minute or two?
Cool. I was involved with a bunch of movements. The anti-war protests that happened before the U.S. invaded Iraq, and also involved with the Occupy movement, organizing in 2 provinces in Canada. And what I saw echoed some of the things that we just talked about. We had some people who are professional / academic organizers, so to speak. And when I say professional, I don't mean that they actually knew how to organize. I just mean that they have studied a lot of books, but they've actually never done anything with people. And they didn't know how to talk to other people who also didn't have masters or PhD in development studies. So they were highly, highly ineffective. And then we had people who came from the union movements, who had history of organizing people in the ground. And we saw a difference in how they were able to work with the people. We also had some people who we later on found out were being paid by the state and by big businesses to disrupt the movement. And we saw how when people with experience and also with the humility and the humanity to talk to other people as human and not to talk down to people, we saw how effective that was in moving people and getting people together and also growing the movement. But we also saw what happened when folks were driven by their ego and chose to trust the police and the state. And that led to some of the encampments being destroyed because they trusted the police and the state. And if they had talked and actually listened to some of the people who have been involved in organizing for a long time, they would know not to trust the police and the state. So I think there's an importance for both the wisdom from those who've been around and doing the work, and also a need for people to learn how to talk to the average person, which is why when I do things back home, I refuse to speak English. I do everything in Pidgin, so that way I don't sound like someone who went to university. Thank you. I'll yield at that.
Thank you, Brother Ifo, for that. Brother Kwame, please come in.
Brother Pigeon, Abimbola is back. Would you let him?
Abimbola?
Yeah, he's back.
Abimbole, are you back? Can you work on your audio? I'll give you 2 minutes, Abimbole, and I'll pass you.
I hope it comes out better now. Is it better?
Yes.
Yes,
you're
so
better now.
Okay. All right, Eshi. Okay, now back to So like I was saying, I said the build-up to the organizing of Festac 77 was, as I'm reading now in the history, I think it's a form of a mass movement because given the power that's be then, they probably wouldn't have allowed the festival to be organized. And today, the festival remains a landmark in history of Africa and especially Nigeria, Lagos, where the edifice that was put up for that festival, the National Theatre, remain one of the major landmark in the city of Lagos today. And quickly, I also moved to the various concerts and awareness that were put together all over the world around 1988 in the demand for the release of Nelson Mandela. I was a little boy, I was just a secondary school boy, ending up education then. I followed the news of these concerts, awareness concerts. Particularly, there was one that was organized in UK where one of the speakers said, they've asked us not to talk anything political, but we won't talk political, but we'll demand liberation and other stuff. And finally, to the third movement that I have been part of is a war is currently going on in Nigeria because we are getting more and more aware of what really our challenges are. Like the current people that we have in power in Nigeria, most of them are neoliberalists. They are running the agenda of the Western world, and I think that's what one of our presenters today called the racial capitalist system.
Yes.
In the institution where cronyism is the agenda. The Mr. President that we have in Nigeria today has been, even in his days as a governor of the state of Lagos, it's been about government for few people. Everything about him, whatever he does, is about few people, his crony, his family, and that is what he has taken to the national level. And unfortunately, majority of people do not understand what the man is doing. He's been shouting reform, reform for the past 3 years. As he's reforming, while he's reforming, majority of people are getting hungry, people are dying on the streets, people are getting emancipated, but he still believes because his trumpeters in the Pretty Wood institutions are praising him that he's doing well, that his reform is going to have effects in future. By when few people that we can count on, they forget about that, they become super rich and they can afford anything they want under the sky. So that is what they think is governance. But some of us, we are now that started at 2020 when we have the toll gate massacre. That is the anti-SAP protest that we had in Nigeria here. And as a build-up from that, a lot of movements are now getting up. Especially, particular one that I'm aware of is what we call obedient movements, which our leading figure is one of the current presidential candidates. He also contested in 2023, and from Graven, you actually believe that he even won the 2023 election, but the systems were screwed against the people's wish. So the current president stole the mandate. And we are still at it again for the coming election in 2027. We believe that people will realize that no matter how sweet talk these people in government are, no matter deception they can put off, media deception and all those stuff, they are not organizing government for the people. Their governance is not about majority, it's about few people who can afford private jets, who can use yachts, who can build any imaginable mansion under the sky. So, but we believe that the way we are doing, but at least we might look like being majority. The last time they even thought we are no more than our candidate will not come more than 1,000 or a few thousand votes, but we were surprised that he was neck to neck and a round of 6 million with the so-called leading candidates. So that's one movement I've been part of, and I'm so far enjoying learning a lot of things. We are learning challenges. Even the people in government, they won't want the opposition to survive. That has been what we've been going through in the last 1 year. The ruling party doing everything to destabilize opposition parties and opposition movements, and it's been quite interesting because consciousness of knowing that
you need
what we are doing. Yeah.
Sorry for cutting you. Our time is up. Please just finish. Just wind up.
Okay, all right. Thank you. I'm rounding up here. Thanks. So that's what I'm. Those are the three things I think I want to mention for now. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I think our time is up. Brother Kwame, please come in.
Yeah, our time is up. So that's fine. Let's proceed to the announcements. My conclusion would be I agree with everyone. So let's do what we have to do. I think Sister Portia has said some of the things we could do. Sister Amma has said some of the things we could do to rebuild the mass movements on the African continent. That's something we have to do, as Sister Amma reminded us, and also Sister Portia reminded us that we need to look at these documents and see what we can take out of them to use. So I think, Brother Pigeon, I think I have heard some really wonderful contributions from the floor. I mean, I'm very, very happy with the contributions I've heard. Anyway, so over to you, Chair. I have shared the page for our events.
Thank you, Brother Kwame. Thank you very much. I will and the one quote from paragraph 82 of Consciousism Study Group, or Consciousism book, actually, chapter 4. Nkrumah says in paragraph 82 of chapter 4 that the people, the body and the soul of the nation, the final sanction of political decision, and the inheritors of sovereignty cannot be fooled for long. Therefore, that is Kwame Nkrumah quote in chapter 4 of Consciousism, which I didn't expect it to be there, and in paragraph 82. If you are not part of a mass movement, yes.
That's the message of Sister Amma and Sister Portia to us today. That is the message.
Now, if you're not part of a mass movement, join one. Mass movement can be either in terms of social, political, economic, and all elements. So please join a movement next to you, be part of a movement, or create a movement. But whatever you do, be part of the mass movement. The mass here is the people, and the revolution belongs to the masses. So thank you very much, comrades who have contributed, who have listened to this conversation. I know many of you did not find time at least to contribute to this, but please, we are, as he said in Ubuntu, I am because we are. The we is a movement. So I must be part of the we. So let's be part of that mass movement so that together we can move far. In the quotes and in the sayings of Swahili or other proverbs is that if you want to go faster, go alone. But if you want to go longer, join the movement. So please, let's be part of the movement in whatever respective or in whatever form it is, whether human rights movement, social movement, economic movement, political movement. I'm having one in Kenya called Accountability and Transparency Party, which is a political movement. So please get and be part of one. Now, I will not share the news for this week due to our time, but next week we are looking at unified legal system. Now, if you have anybody who has a legal background here, it will be very interesting if you can join us. Brother Kwame has adopted the pattern of trying to look at the AU documentations, which I think is very interesting for us also to know that those documents exist. But we will be interested to have any legal officer or any lawyer or any advocate or any barrister, in whatever name you call yourself, will be part of this. The aspect of our looking at unified legal system is to have a unified continental constitution. I think we are moving to the conference we have been so calling for a long time. Is it possible that we can have a unified constitution or a unified legal system in the continent? And what will it take for us to be there? What must be done? What will it take for us to do it? And how can we get there? So that is the key conversation we're looking forward to next Saturday. Yes, we can research what has been done, but the key question is how we get there. Because we're interested to have one constitution of the continent that defines us as one people. Because those so many constitutions that create so many neocolonial governments is what's a problem for us. So anybody who can do a research on this, who know a legal person on this, who can help us answer the question of a unified African government. That's why it's a UAG, a unified African government. How do we get a unified legal system? And I believe that is the system that will do away with all borders and all these neocolonial states if we have a unified legal system. So that's what we'll be looking at next week. The week after that, we'll be actually going to the what you call continental markets. And then we'll be going to integrated transport energy system, anti-imperialist alliances, and capital cities. Now, permit me to recognize the presence also of Nana Yao as we close this. Thank you very much, Brother Mfanelo, for joining us, and thank you very much, Brother Coco, even though you didn't get an opportunity. Brother De Black, thank you for being here. It's been long before I saw you, or before we meet, or before you be part of this conversation. Brantford Kwesi Tay, we request you to please join us again next week. I think it's your first time joining us. And thank you very much also for Sister Shaza to be part of this conversation, alongside other members that I had mentioned before, Brother Philip, Brother Ifo, Sister Hama, Brother Sam, Brother Bimboli, Sister Portia, Sister Aidan, Brother Kwame. Thank you very much for your time and your attention and your participation. This is what keeps us moving. This is our weekly conversation. For now, I don't have much to say, but yes, to thank you all, and let's meet again this Monday for Pan-African Reading Club. On Thursday, we continue the Consciousing study group for the philosophy and ideology, and on Saturday, we go back to the unification. Bye-bye for now, and may you all have a lovely evening, morning, or afternoon from wherever you are.
Good
Thank
night,
you.
everybody. Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.